In this lesson, we are going to practice graphing quadratic inequalities. So we'll graph a parabola on the coordinate plane, and then we will be shading to show the inequality portion. These are the steps to graphing a quadratic inequality. You want to graph the parabola using a dotted line for less or greater than, or a solid line for less than or equal to or greater than or equal to. Then pick a test point that's either inside or outside the parabola, and test that point in the inequality to see if you should shade inside or outside the parabola. Let's look at an example. So we have our parabola. We have y is less than or equal to x squared minus 3x minus 3. Since this quadratic is written in standard form, let's find the vertex by doing negative b over 2a. Our b is negative 3, so the opposite of that would be 3 over 2 times a, which is 1. So we have 3 over 2, which is 1.5. Then we want to put that back into the quadratic to find our y value of our vertex. So y is going to equal 1.5 squared minus 3 times 1.5 minus 3. So y equals, when I plug that in, it's going to be negative 5.25. So my vertex is at the point 1.5, negative 5.25. So when we find that on the coordinate plane, we're going to be at 1.5 for x, and then down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, just below that line right here, negative 5.25. Then we can use our chart with our parent function to graph our other points. So we have x and f of x, and our leading coefficient for our function here is 1 as well. So remember, we're at 0, 1, 2, and then when we square that, we're at 0, 1, and 4. So what we will do is we will go this is our 0, 0, and we're at 1.5, so we're going to go over 1, which would be over to 2.5, and then up 1, which is going to be at negative 4.25. So it'll be right about here, and then we'll reflect that to the other side. And then we will go over 2 to the right from our new vertex, 1, 2, and up 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we'll reflect that to the other side. We can also make another point if we like, but we don't have to. Now we take a look at our sign. It's less than or equal to. Since it's less than or equal to, we're going to want a solid line to draw our parabola. Now we need to determine where we're going to shade, if we shade inside or outside the parabola to satisfy and show our solution for our inequality. So we need to pick a point to test. Generally, if we can pick the origin, that's the easiest point to test, and in this case the origin is inside of our parabola. So all we need to do is put our test point, and if we're going to use the origin, we're going to replace or substitute the origin into our inequality. So 0 is less than or equal to 0 squared minus 3 times 0 is 0, so 0 minus 3 would be negative 3. Is 0 smaller than negative 3? No, it's not. So we will not shade inside where the 0, 0 is located. Our inequality would be shading on the outside. And all the points on the outside of the parabola would satisfy our inequality. Let's take a look at another example. So we have y is greater than 2x squared plus 3x. So we can again, since this is written in standard form, use negative b over 2a to find the x portion of our vertex. b is 3, so we have negative 3 over 2 times a, which is 2, so we have negative 3/4. That's going to be the x portion of our vertex, and if we would rather use that as negative 0.75, that might be easier to plug into our equation. So we have 2 times negative 0.75 squared plus 3 times negative 0.75. And when we plug that into the calculator, y then is equal to negative 1.125. So our vertex is going to be at negative 0.75 and negative 1.125. So we're going to go ahead and graph that. So we're at negative 0.75 and then down just barely below the axis at negative 1.125. Now we can set up our parent function to graph the rest of ours. So we remember we have x, 0, and 1, and 2. Our f of x is at 0, 1, and 4. And this time we need our third column, a of f of x, because our leading coefficient is 2. So we're going to multiply each of these by 2. And remember when we're graphing that this center column we don't use now when we have multiplied by our leading coefficient. So we'll take a look. This is our new 0, 0, and then we want to go over 1 and up 2. So that would be barely below. That will be about right in here. And then we're going to reflect that to the other side. And so we are going to be right over in here. And then we're going to go over 2. So that would be 1, 2, and up 8. So it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And then we're going to go 1, 2, 1, and reflect that to the other side. And now we're going to take a look at our original inequality symbol, and it is greater than, so we're going to make a dotted line for our parabola. So we'll just make a dotted line, getting the general shape in of our parabola. Okay, and now we need to pick a test point. Our parabola doesn't go through the origin, but it's very close to it. So we might want to pick something that is either definitely inside or definitely outside to test. So why don't we pick the point 2, 0, which would be located right here to test, and that is on the outside of the parabola. So we'll pick the point 2, 0. It's good to pick something on the axis where at least one of our values is 0 to plug in. So if y is 0, is y greater than, and when we plug 2 in, 2 squared is 4, 4 times 2 is 8, and then 3 times 2 is 6, is 0 greater than 14? And that would be no. So since that is no, that means we're not going to shade on the outside of the parabola, but we would shade on the inside of the parabola. Let's take a look at another example. We have y is greater than negative x squared plus 4x minus 1. So again, we could use x equals negative b over 2a to find the x portion of our vertex, which would be negative 4 over 2 times negative 1. Negative 4 over negative 2 would be 2 is the x portion of our vertex. Then we can plug that in to find the y portion of our vertex. Please remember that you're going to square the 2 first and then multiply it by negative 1. So that's going to be negative 4 plus 8 minus 1. Negative 4 plus 8 is 4, and 4 minus 1 would be 3. So our vertex is at the point 2, 3. So we're going to graph that point. We'll graph the point 2, 3 over 2 and up 3, and that will be our vertex. And then we'll use our parent function to find our other points. And this time our leading coefficient is negative 1. So that becomes 0, negative 1, and negative 4. Remembering that we don't use the center column when we are going to now graph. So we'll take a look. From our new vertex, we're going to go over 1 and down 1, and we'll reflect that to the other side. And then we're going to go over 2 and down 4. 1, 2, 1, 2, 4, and we'll reflect that to the other side. We'll take a look at our inequality symbol, and since it is a greater than symbol, we'll draw in our parabola using dotted line. And then we need to pick a test point, and we should pick one that's definitely on the outside or definitely on the inside. So this time I'm going to use the point 0, 5, which is right up here, and check to see if that works in our inequality. So if y is 5, is that greater than 0 squared plus 4 times 0 minus 1? Is 5 greater than negative 1? Yes, it is. So we need to shade, since we said yes and my test point was outside the parabola, then we're going to shade on the outside of the parabola. Let's do one more example. Y is less than x squared. So we need to find the vertex. Remember, that's negative b over 2a. There isn't a b value, so that means that that is 0, and when we plug it in, we get 0 for the y. So our vertex is at the point 0, 0, and you may recognize this as being the parent function. So when we graph the parent function, remember that we're going to use our original table, 0, 1, 2, 0, 1, 4, to find our other points. So we'll put our vertex at 0, 0, and we'll use our parent function, which is over 1, up 1, reflect that point, and then over 2 and up 4, and then we'll reflect that point to the other side. And when we take a look, this is a less than symbol, so again we need to use a dotted line to make our parabola. And we could put in another couple points, but this will be fine. And now we need to determine where to shade. So we either want to pick a point definitely inside or definitely outside. We don't want to use the origin in this case because the origin is our vertex. So let's pick a point on the outside. Let's pick the point 2, 0, which is outside the parabola. So if my y is 0 and my x is 2, 2 squared is 4, is 0 less than 4? Yes, it is. And I use the point 2, 0, which is on the outside. So since I said yes, that means I do want to shade where that point is located, which is on the outside of my parabola. Let's review. When we're graphing inequalities of parabolas, you want to first graph the parabola using a solid line for less than or equal to or greater than or equal to, and a dotted line for less than or greater than. Test a point to determine if the shading should be inside or outside the parabola, and then go ahead and shade. Please remember to complete the reflection.